Why would a father spend New Year's Eve alone, shunned by his own family, and then become the headline across the city the moment midnight strikes? How does a quiet, grieving man turn the tables on those who erased him, delivering a public, lawful reckoning that no one saw coming? The answer is written in the stunned voice of my son, who always thought he knew exactly what I'd do with my life's work. The clock on my apartment wall read 11:47 p.m. as I sat alone in my worn leather recliner, watching the city's New Year's Eve fireworks bloom across the television screen. The anchor's voice droned on about celebration and new beginnings, but all I could hear was my son's voice from 3 days earlier. "You'll just make everyone uncomfortable, Dad. Maybe it's better if you just reflect on your life this year." Dr. Harold Granger. That's me, though everyone just calls me Hal. 64 years old, retired dentist, and apparently too much of an embarrassment for my own family's New Year's Eve party. I took a sip of lukewarm tea and tried not to think about how Ethan had said those words, standing in the doorway of his suburban house like I was some door-to-door salesman he couldn't wait to get rid of. The memory played back like a bad movie. I'd driven over to Ethan's place on Tuesday, hoping to ask about their New Year's plans. Nothing fancy, just wanted to spend the evening with family. But when Melissa, my daughter-in-law, appeared behind him in the hallway, I caught the tail end of her conversation with someone on the phone. "I know, right? He's so cheap and boring. Like, who wants to spend New Year's with someone who never talks and just sits there judging everyone?" Ethan had the decency to look embarrassed for about half a second before his expression hardened. "Look, Dad, we've got a lot of young people coming over. It's going to be loud and everyone's going to be talking about business ventures and investments. You know, stuff you don't really get." I'd nodded and smiled, the way I always did. "Of course, son, I understand." But I didn't understand. Not really. How had I become such a stranger to my own child? The worst part came yesterday at the supermarket. I was picking up groceries, just the basics, since cooking for one doesn't require much, when I spotted Ethan and Melissa in the parking lot with some of her friends from the boutique where she worked. I approached with a friendly wave, genuinely happy to see them. "Oh, hey, Dad," Ethan said, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "Just getting some food for the week," I replied, holding up my modest shopping bag. "How are you both?" Melissa barely looked up from her phone, but her friends were watching with barely concealed amusement. One of them, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and too much makeup, whispered something that made the others giggle. "We're busy, Dad," Ethan said, already turning away. "See you around." And that was it. No introduction to Melissa's friends, no small talk, nothing. I stood there holding my groceries while they walked away, Melissa's voice carrying back to me. "That's Ethan's dad. Yeah, the one I told you about. Lives alone in that tiny apartment downtown." I'd driven home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. Now, sitting in my apartment as the year wound down to its final minutes, I checked my phone out of habit. The family group chat, the one Ethan had created months ago, was filled with photos from their party. Melissa in a sparkly dress, raising a champagne glass. Ethan laughing with friends I didn't recognize. Various cousins and relatives I barely saw anymore, all gathered in the warm glow of celebration. Not one message asking where I was. Not one person wondering if I was okay. I scrolled through the photos, each one a small knife twist. There was Ethan's cousin Derek, who used to come to me for dental work when he was broke. There was my nephew Mason, whose clinic I'd helped finance when he was starting out. All of them laughing and celebrating, while I sat alone with my tea and my memories. The television anchor's voice grew excited as midnight approached. "Just 2 minutes left in the year, folks. Time to think about new beginnings and fresh starts." I glanced at my calendar on the kitchen counter, where Janice's birthday was circled in red ink. February 14th, Valentine's Day. She used to joke that it was the universe's way of making sure I'd never forget to be romantic. My sweet Janice, who'd been gone for 3 years now, but whose absence still felt like a physical ache in my chest. She would have hated seeing me like this. Janice had always been the one to stand up for me when Ethan became too demanding or dismissive. Even though he wasn't her biological son, his mother, my first wife, Catherine, had passed away during his birth. Janice had treated him with nothing but love and patience. And how had he repaid her? With cold indifference during her illness and barely concealed relief when she was gone. 10, 9, 8. The crowd on TV began the countdown. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe Ethan was calling to wish me a happy new year after all. But it was just a breaking news notification. I ignored it, setting the phone face down on the side table. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! Fireworks exploded across the screen in brilliant cascades of gold and silver. Somewhere across town, my family was probably hugging and laughing and making toasts about their bright futures. And here I sat, a 64-year-old man who'd spent his life building dental practices and saving money and trying to be a good father, completely alone. I finished my tea and headed to bed, trying not to think about how this might be the shape of all my New Years to come. The next morning, I drove out to Restwood Cemetery as I did every few weeks. Janice's grave was in a quiet section under an old oak tree, exactly where she'd wanted it. The headstone was simple granite with her name, dates, and the inscription she'd chosen herself. She loved deeply and was deeply loved. I knelt down and brushed some fallen leaves from the stone, my knees creaking in protest. "Happy New Year, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I know you're probably shaking your head at me right now." Janice had always been able to read people better than I could. Even when Ethan was just a sullen teenager, she'd see right through his moods to whatever was really bothering him. She'd make his favorite dinner or suggest a movie night, and somehow she'd get him talking. Not me. I was always too awkward, too uncertain about how to connect with my own son. I remembered the day I first brought her home to meet Ethan. He was 14 then, 7 years after Catherine had passed away, and I had been terrified that he would resent having a new woman in our lives. But Janice had walked into our house with a plate of homemade cookies and asked Ethan about the model airplane he was building. Within an hour, they were sitting at the kitchen table together, heads bent over the instruction manual. "She's okay, I guess," was all Ethan said that night, but I could see the relief in his eyes. We'd been two lost men stumbling through life together, and suddenly, we had someone who knew how to make a house feel like a home. For 5 years, we were genuinely happy. Janice attended Ethan's high school graduation, helped him pick out his first apartment, even tried to give him dating advice that made him blush and laugh. She was the one who suggested I expand from my single dental practice to multiple clinics. "You're too good at this to keep it small, Hal," she'd said. "Think of all the people you could help." So I did. I took out loans, found good locations, hired excellent staff. By the time Janice got sick, I had 4 thriving dental clinics across the city. The work was demanding, but it was satisfying to build something meaningful, something that served the community. Then came the diagnosis: ovarian cancer, stage 3. I still remembered the oncologist's careful professional tone as he explained the treatment options. Janice had squeezed my hand and asked practical questions about timelines and side effects, while I sat there feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. Ethan was 26 then, supposedly an adult, but he'd reacted to Janice's illness like a child. He stopped coming around as much, always had excuses when I asked him to visit. "It's just hard to see her like that, Dad," he'd said, as if his discomfort was more important than Janice's need for family support. During her final months, when she was weak from chemo and spending most of her time in the hospital, I'd practically lived in that oncology wing. I got to know every nurse, every orderly, every volunteer. I watched them care for Janice with such skill and compassion, fighting for every extra day, every small comfort they could give her. And where was Ethan? Building his network, as he called it. Going to business meetups and startup conferences, always chasing some vague dream of entrepreneurial success that never quite materialized. He came to the funeral, of course, and said all the right words, but I could see him checking his phone during the service. After Janice passed away, I couldn't bring myself to keep the clinics running. Everything reminded me of her encouragement, her faith in what I was building. So I sold them, all 4 practices, the equipment, even the building I owned. It was a strong deal, more money than I'd ever imagined having when I was a young dentist just starting out. That was when Ethan's attitude toward me truly shifted. Suddenly, he was very eager to spend time with his old dad. He called regularly, always steering the conversation toward my retirement plans and whether I needed help managing my assets. He brought Melissa around more often, and she made pointed remarks about how wasteful it was for someone my age to keep so much money sitting in savings accounts. "You should be enjoying life, Hal," she'd say with that bright, artificial smile of hers. "You can't keep it forever, right?" What she really meant was that my time was limited anyway, so I might as well hand the money over now. I stood up from Janice's grave, my knees protesting again. "I miss you," I told the headstone. "I miss having someone who understood what really mattered." On my way home, I drove past my old clinic on Maple Street. The new owner had kept the same sign design, just changed the name. It looked good, busy, and successful. I felt a flicker of pride that I'd built something lasting, something that continued to serve people even after I was gone. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment going through some old files. In the back of my desk drawer, I found the folder labeled Janice Oncology. It contained all the paperwork from her treatment, insurance forms, receipts, and notes I'd taken during meetings with her doctors. I'd kept it all, not really sure why. But as I flipped through the pages, I found myself thinking about Dr. Priya Halden, the oncologist who'd cared for Janice. She'd been honest without being cruel, hopeful without making false promises. She'd treated Janice like a person, not just a case, and she'd treated me like a partner in the fight, not just a helpless bystander. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and added it to the folder, though I didn't write anything on it yet. Just sat there, thinking about the difference between the people who'd stood by us during the hardest time of our lives and the people who'd found excuses to stay away. Outside my window, the city was getting back to its normal rhythm after the holiday. People were returning to work, making resolutions, planning for the future. I wondered what this new year might hold for me. I had a feeling it was going to be different from what anyone expected. 2 days later, I met my old friend Alan McShane for coffee at our usual spot downtown. Alan and I had known each other for over 30 years. He'd been a hospital administrator back when I was building my practice, and we'd often crossed paths professionally. Now, retired like me, he was one of the few people who still seemed to enjoy my company without any agenda. "You look tired, Hal," Alan said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "How was your New Year?" "Quiet," I replied. "Spent it at home." Alan raised an eyebrow. He'd met Ethan several times over the years and had never been particularly impressed. "Let me guess. Family gathering that somehow didn't include you?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say more without sounding bitter. "You know," Alan said carefully, "you don't have to keep letting them treat you like that. You've got options, Hal. More options than most people." I knew what he meant. The money from selling the clinics, plus my retirement savings and Janice's life insurance, added up to a substantial sum. Not wealthy by some standards, but certainly enough to command respect from people who only seemed to value dollar signs. "Ethan's my son," I said. "Family is family." "Family doesn't treat family like an embarrassment," Alan replied. "Janice wouldn't have stood for it, and you know it." He was right, of course. Janice had never hesitated to call out bad behavior, even from Ethan, especially from Ethan. That afternoon, I found myself driving to the hospital where Janice had been treated. I wasn't sure why. I just felt drawn there. I parked and walked through the main entrance, following the familiar path to the oncology wing. The department looked exactly the same. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs in the waiting area, and that particular smell of disinfectant mixed with the flowers that visitors brought. I watched the nurses moving between rooms with quiet efficiency, saw family members holding hands in the hallway, witnessed the same mixture of hope and fear that I remembered so well. A young woman, probably in her 30s, sat alone in one of the waiting room chairs. She was crying silently, clutching a tissue. Without thinking, I approached her. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm fine, My mom is in surgery. They're removing a tumor and She gestured helplessly. "I understand," I said, sitting down beside her. "My wife was treated here 3 years ago. The doctors and nurses here are exceptional. Your mother is in good hands." We talked for a few minutes. Nothing profound, just the kind of small comfort that strangers can sometimes offer each other. When her family arrived, she thanked me and rejoined them. I stayed a little longer, watching the quiet dedication of the medical staff, remembering how they'd cared for Janice with such skill and compassion. On the drive home, my phone rang. Ethan. "Hey, Dad," he said, and I could hear Melissa talking in the background. "Listen, I've been thinking about that conversation we had a few months ago, about your savings and investment strategies." Here we go, I thought. What about it? Well, Melissa and I have been working on this business plan. It's really exciting stuff. E-commerce, social media marketing, all the growth sectors. But we need some initial capital to really make it work. I'd heard variations of this pitch before. Ethan had been working on various business ideas for years, but none of them ever seemed to progress beyond the planning stage. Meanwhile, he and Melissa lived comfortably on his job at a marketing firm, supplemented by the occasional loan from me that never got repaid. "How much initial capital?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be vague. "That's the thing. We need to move fast to capture the market opportunity. I was thinking maybe we could discuss transferring some of your assets now rather than waiting for, later." "Rather than waiting for me to be gone," he meant. Melissa's voice came through clearly now. "Tell him about the tax advantages, babe, how it's actually better for him financially." I pulled into my apartment building's parking lot and sat in the car, listening to my son explain how giving him my life savings was actually a favor to myself. He'd clearly rehearsed this speech, complete with buzzwords about wealth transfer strategies and maximizing family financial efficiency. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Dad, you always say that. Look, I know you're not getting any younger, and I know you want to make sure your money goes to family rather than taxes or whatever. This way, you can see the money doing good while you're still alive." Doing good. As if funding his half-baked business fantasies was some kind of charitable work. I said, "I'll think about it, Ethan." I heard him sigh. "Fine. But don't think too long, okay? Opportunities like this don't wait around forever." After I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, watching people come and go from the apartment building. Young families with children, elderly couples helping each other with groceries, single professionals hurrying home from work. Normal people living normal lives, treating each other with basic respect and kindness. When had I become someone whose own family saw me as nothing more than a bank account with an inconveniently long lifespan? That evening, I opened my laptop and checked Melissa's social media accounts, something I rarely did, but curiosity got the better of me. Her latest post was a photo of her and Ethan standing next to a shiny new BMW in a dealership showroom. The caption read, "Manifesting our big year ahead. 2024 is going to be amazing. Blessed our goals, our new car, our success." The car looked expensive, very expensive, and yet they were pressuring me for money to fund their business venture? I closed the laptop and walked to my kitchen counter where my calendar still hung with Janice's birthday circled in red. Next to it, I noticed, was a reminder I'd written for Thursday. Meeting, Dr. Priya Halden, Oncology Dept, 2 p.m. I'd forgotten about that appointment. Dr. Halden had called last week, something about a consultation regarding hospital foundation activities. I'd agreed to meet with her, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was time to find out. I pulled out the folder labeled Janice Oncology and added a few more papers to it. My latest savings account statements, the insurance documents, and a pamphlet about cancer research that I'd picked up at the hospital earlier. Then I made a phone call to my lawyer, Theodore Blackwood. "Hal, good to hear from you," Ted said. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to schedule a meeting," I said. "Soon. I want to review some options regarding my estate planning." "Of course. Any particular urgency?" I thought about Ethan's phone call, about Melissa's social media post, about spending New Year's Eve alone while my family celebrated without me. "Yes," I said. "I think it's time to make some decisions about my legacy." Thursday afternoon found me sitting in Theodore Blackwood's law office, a place I'd visited several times over the years for routine legal matters. Ted was a few years younger than me, a careful and thorough attorney who'd handled Janice's will and helped me with the clinic sales. "So, Hal," Ted said, spreading several documents across his mahogany desk, "you mentioned wanting to review your estate planning options. Are we talking about updates to your current will, or are you considering more significant changes?" I'd been thinking about this conversation for days. "More significant changes," I said. "I want to understand all of my options regarding charitable giving, particularly to medical institutions." Ted's eyebrows rose slightly. "Charitable giving. I see. Are we talking about a specific bequest in your will, or are you considering lifetime giving?" "Both, potentially. What would be the implications of a substantial donation to a hospital foundation? Something that would fund equipment purchases or research?" Ted pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. "Well, there are several structures we could use. A direct donation, obviously, but also charitable remainder trusts, donor-advised funds, or even establishing a named fund within the hospital's foundation. The tax implications vary, and of course, the timing affects everything." We spent the next hour going through the details. Ted explained how I could structure a donation to maximize both the charitable impact and the tax benefits. More importantly, he outlined how such a donation could be made public, with appropriate fanfare and recognition if that was something I desired. "The hospital would likely want to publicize a major gift," Ted explained. "Naming opportunities, press releases, dedication ceremonies. It's part of how they encourage other donors." "And the timing of such an announcement?" "Entirely up to you. Some donors prefer to remain anonymous, others want maximum visibility. If you're looking to make a statement, the hospital's development office would work with you on timing and presentation." I signed several updated documents that afternoon: a revised will, new beneficiary forms for my retirement accounts, and letters of intent that gave me flexibility to make substantial charitable contributions. Ted was discreet enough not to ask about my motivations, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "One more thing," I said as we wrapped up. "If I were to make a major announcement about a charitable gift, what would be the best way to ensure it gets appropriate media attention?" Ted smiled. "Planning to surprise someone?" "You could say that." The next day, I met with Alan McShane at the hospital, this time in the administrative offices rather than the coffee shop. Alan had arranged for me to sit down with Dr. Priya Halden and the hospital's development director, an energetic woman named Catherine Brennan. "Mr. Granger," Dr. Halden said, "Alan tells me you're interested in supporting oncology research and patient care. I have to say, any contribution would be deeply appreciated. We're always in need of updated equipment and research funding." Catherine Brennan opened a folder filled with glossy brochures and funding proposals. We have several ongoing initiatives that could benefit from donor support. There's our new imaging equipment fund, the patient comfort and family support programs, and our research partnership with the university. I listened carefully as they outlined the various needs and opportunities. The numbers were substantial, the kind of money that could make a real difference in patient outcomes and research capabilities. What would be involved in establishing a named fund? I asked. Something permanent that would continue supporting the department indefinitely. Dr. Halden and Catherine exchanged glances. That would depend on the size of the contribution, Catherine said carefully. But yes, we do have several named funds that provide ongoing support for specific programs. And such a fund could be announced publicly, with appropriate recognition for the donor and dedication to someone's memory? Absolutely, Catherine said, her eyes lighting up. We often hold dedication ceremonies, invite the media, create permanent displays recognizing major donors. It's a wonderful way to honor both the donor and anyone being memorialized. We talked for another 30 minutes about logistics and possibilities. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Halden walked me to the elevator. Mr. Granger, she said quietly, I remember your wife. Janice was a remarkable woman, so gracious and positive, even during her treatment. I hope you know how much the staff appreciated the way you supported her. Not every family handles illness with such dignity. I thanked her and headed home, my mind spinning with possibilities. That evening, I spent several hours at the public library, researching major charitable announcements and how they were typically handled by the media. I learned about press releases, media advisories, and the kind of human interest stories that local news stations love to cover. I took careful notes, developing a clearer picture of how to ensure maximum visibility for the right kind of story. While I was there, I also researched Ethan's various business ventures from over the years. Social media marketing company that never launched. Import-export business that existed only on paper. Cryptocurrency investment scheme that lost money. A pattern of big dreams and poor execution, funded largely by my occasional loans and his steady but unremarkable salary. Meanwhile, Melissa had posted more photos from their New Year's party, including several shots of her showing off expensive jewelry to her friends. The comments were full of praise for her success and questions about how she and Ethan were doing so well. She basked in the attention, never mentioning that their lifestyle was largely subsidized by guilt trips aimed at Ethan's aging father. On my way out of the library, I stopped at a payphone, one of the few remaining in the city, and made a call to Channel 7 News. I spoke with a producer about the possibility of covering a major charitable announcement mentioning the potential for a significant donation to the local hospital's oncology department. We love those kinds of stories, the producer said enthusiastically. Feel-good news, community impact, human interest angle. When were you thinking of making this announcement? Soon, I said. Possibly New Year's Eve, if that timing works for your programming. New Year's Eve? That's interesting timing. Most people are focused on parties and celebrations. Exactly, I said. It would stand out. Back home, I found a voicemail from Ethan. His tone was more demanding this time, less patient with his old dad's slow decision-making. Hey Dad, it's me. I talked to Melissa, and we really need to move forward with this investment opportunity. I'm going to email you a business proposal with all the details. Just so you understand, we're talking about a time-sensitive situation here. The market window won't stay open forever, and frankly, it's not like you're doing anything productive with that money sitting in savings accounts. I played the message twice, noting the shift in his tone. The polite requests were becoming demands. The subtle hints about my mortality were becoming less subtle. I checked my email and found the business proposal he'd mentioned. It was 3 pages of buzzwords and vague promises, with no concrete business plan, no market analysis, no realistic financial projections. Just enthusiasm and entitlement, wrapped in corporate jargon. At the bottom of the email, almost as an afterthought, was the amount he was requesting: $400,000, nearly half of my total savings, for a business plan that wouldn't pass muster in a high school economics class. I printed out the email and added it to my growing folder of documentation. Then, I opened my laptop and began drafting a different kind of business plan, one that would put my money to work in ways that Ethan and Melissa would never expect. The hospital had sent me a follow-up packet after our meeting, including detailed information about their equipment needs and research programs. I spread the materials across my kitchen table, along with my financial statements and Ted Blackwood's legal documents. By midnight, I had a plan, a real plan, with real numbers and real impact. And in exactly 10 days, on New Year's Eve, everyone would learn what I'd decided to do with my life's work. The week between Christmas and New Year's Eve passed in a blur of quiet preparation. I spent my mornings finalizing details with Ted Blackwood, my afternoons coordinating with the hospital's development office, and my evenings reviewing every document, every number, every word of the announcement that would change everything. On December 28th, I sat at my kitchen table with 3 documents spread before me: the donation agreement that would establish the Janice Granger Memorial Fund, my updated will that redirected my entire estate away from Ethan, and the script for my television appearance. My hands trembled slightly as I reviewed each page, not from fear, but from anticipation. The Memorial Fund would provide $750,000 immediately for new oncology equipment, plus an additional $200,000 from my estate to ensure ongoing research support. Nearly $1 million that would help cancer patients for years to come. Nearly $1 million that Ethan had been counting on inheriting. Alan called that afternoon to confirm the final arrangements. The hospital is thrilled, Hal. Dr. Halden says this donation will allow them to purchase a new imaging system that they've needed for years. You're going to save lives with this. That's the idea, I replied. And you're sure about the timing? New Year's Eve is going to catch everyone off guard. Especially my family, I said. That's exactly the point. I walked to my mailbox that evening and found a card from Ethan, the first communication I'd received from him since his demanding voicemail. The card was generic, something he'd clearly picked up at a gas station. Inside, his message was brief. Maybe next year you'll be less difficult. Melissa says hi. Less difficult, as if wanting to be treated with basic respect by my own son was some kind of character flaw. I added the card to my folder of evidence, a final piece of documentation showing exactly how my family viewed me. Melissa's social media activity had ramped up as the year wound down. She posted daily updates about their amazing year ahead, their big plans, and their exciting opportunities. Her friends responded with heart emojis and comments like, "You guys deserve everything and can't wait to see what 2024 brings you." If only they knew. On December 30th, I received a call from Tyrese Carter, the anchor who would be conducting my interview at Channel 7 News. "Mr. Granger, I wanted to touch base before tomorrow's segment. This is quite a generous donation you're making. Can you tell me a bit about what inspired it?" I'd prepared for this question. My late wife received excellent care in the oncology department. I want to ensure that other families have access to the same level of treatment and compassion. And the timing? New Year's Eve is an interesting choice for this kind of announcement. New beginnings, I said simply. It seemed appropriate. We confirmed the details. I would arrive at the studio at 10:30 p.m., and the segment would air live at 11:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before midnight. Perfect timing to ensure maximum viewership as people waited for the ball drop. That night, I laid out my best suit, the navy blue one that Janice had always said made me look distinguished. I polished my shoes, trimmed my beard, and practiced my talking points one more time. This would be the most important conversation of my life, and I wanted to get every word right. On New Year's Eve morning, I made one final trip to Janice's grave. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful under a light dusting of snow. "Today's the day, sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside her headstone. "I'm going to make sure your memory does some real good in this world, and I'm going to show Ethan and Melissa exactly what they chose to throw away when they decided I wasn't worth their respect." I spent the afternoon in quiet preparation, reviewing my notes one last time and organizing the folder of documents that told the complete story: Ethan's dismissive emails, Melissa's social media posts showing off their expensive lifestyle, the business proposal that revealed their complete lack of planning or responsibility, and the legal documents that showed where my money was really going. At 6 p.m. my phone rang. Ethan probably calling to wish me a happy new year and maybe make one last pitch for his business venture. "Hey, Dad," he said, and I could hear party preparations in the background. "Just wanted to check in. Have you had a chance to look at that business proposal I sent?" "I've looked at it," I said. I know it's a big decision, but like I said, this opportunity won't wait forever. Melissa and I are really excited about the potential here." In the background, I could hear Melissa laughing with someone, probably about how they were going to spend my money. "I've made my decision, Ethan," I said. "Great. So we can move forward with the transfer? I was thinking we could meet with your bank tomorrow and—" "You'll find out about my decision soon enough," I interrupted. "Enjoy your party." I hung up before he could respond. At 9:30 p.m., I put on my suit jacket and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like what I was: a respectable, successful man who had built something meaningful with his life. Not the embarrassing burden that my family saw when they looked at me. I picked up the folder labeled Janice Oncology and my car keys. It was time to show the world, and my family, what Dr. Harold Granger was really made of. The city was alive with New Year's Eve energy as I drove to the television station. Restaurants were packed, people were dressed up and laughing on the sidewalks, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Everyone was looking forward to new beginnings, including me. I parked at Channel 7 and walked into the lobby, where a young production assistant was waiting for me. "Mr. Granger, I'm Mina. We spoke on the phone. Ready to make some news?" I smiled and followed her toward the studio. "More ready than you know." The Channel 7 news studio was smaller than I'd expected, but the lights were bright and professional. Tyrese Carter stood up to shake my hand as the production crew made final adjustments to the cameras and lighting. "Mr. Granger, thank you for joining us tonight," Tyrese said, his voice warm and genuine. "I have to say, this is one of the most generous donations our community has seen in years. The hospital must be thrilled." I settled into the guest chair, my folder of documents resting on my lap. Through the studio windows, I could see the city's New Year's Eve celebrations beginning to peak. Somewhere out there, Ethan and Melissa were probably toasting their bright future with my money. They had no idea what was coming. 30 seconds, called the director. Tyrese straightened his tie and looked into the camera. "And we're live in 5, 4, 3. The red light on the camera came on, and Tyrese smiled his professional anchor smile. "Good evening, and welcome back to Channel 7 News. I'm Tyrese Carter. As we prepare to ring in the new year, we're joined by Dr. Harold Granger, a retired dentist and longtime member of our community, who is making a very special announcement tonight. Dr. Granger, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me, Tyrese," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Now you're here to announce a major donation to our local hospital's oncology department. Can you tell us about that?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking of Ethan and Melissa watching from their party, probably wondering why their embarrassing old dad was on television. "Yes, Tyrese. Tonight I'm announcing the establishment of the Janice Weaver Granger Memorial Fund, which will provide $750,000 for new oncology equipment and an additional $200,000 for ongoing research support." Tyrese's eyebrows rose. "That's nearly $1 million, Dr. Granger. This is an extraordinary gift. My late wife, Janice, received exceptional care in the oncology department 3 years ago," I continued. The doctors and nurses there showed her, and our family, such skill and compassion during the most difficult time of our lives. I want to ensure that other families receive that same level of care. The studio door opened quietly, and Dr. Priya Halden entered, just as we'd planned. She took a seat in the second guest chair. "Dr. Halden," Tyrese said, "you're the chief oncologist at the hospital. Can you tell us what this donation will mean for your department?" Dr. Halden smiled, her professional demeanor warm but clearly emotional. "Mr. Granger's generosity will allow us to purchase a state-of-the-art imaging system that we've needed for years. This equipment will help us detect cancers earlier, plan treatments more precisely, and ultimately save more lives. It's truly a transformative gift." "And Dr. Granger," Tyrese continued, "this fund is named for your late wife. Can you tell us about Janice?" This was the moment I'd been preparing for. "Janice was the kindest, most loving person I've ever known," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "She treated my son as if he were her own child, even though she wasn't his biological mother. She supported my dreams of expanding my dental practice and encouraged me to serve our community. When she got sick, she faced her illness with such grace and courage. The staff here at the hospital became like family to us." I paused, thinking of Ethan's cold indifference during Janice's illness, his absence during her final weeks. Janice believed that when you're blessed with resources, you have a responsibility to use them for good. This donation represents the proceeds from selling my dental clinics, plus my life savings. It's my entire estate, redirected to honor her memory and continue the work of healing that meant so much to both of us. The words hung in the air. My entire estate. Tyrese looked stunned. "Your entire estate, Dr. Granger?" "Yes, nearly $1 million that will fund cancer research and patient care for years to come. Janice would have wanted the money to help people, not sit idle in bank accounts." Dr. Halden leaned forward. "Mr. Granger, I can't adequately express what this means. Your wife would be so proud. This donation will help us save lives, support families, and advance research that could benefit cancer patients everywhere." Tyrese turned back to the camera. "An extraordinary act of generosity from Dr. Harold Granger, establishing the Janice Weaver Granger Memorial Fund, with a donation of nearly $1 million to our local hospital's oncology department." The camera pulled back to show all three of us. Behind Tyrese, I could see the production crew looking moved by the story. This was the kind of news they loved to cover. Genuine human goodness in a world that often seemed short on both. "Dr. Granger," Tyrese said, "do you have any final thoughts as we approach the new year?" I looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere in the city, my son was watching this broadcast with growing horror as he realized what I'd done. "Family means different things to different people," I said quietly. "Some people think family is about lineage, inheritance, or what you can take from one another. But I learned from Janice that real family is about love, respect, and showing up for each other when it matters most. This donation honors the family that showed up for us when we needed them most, the doctors, nurses, and staff who treated Janice with such care and dignity." I paused, thinking of all the times Ethan had dismissed me, all the ways Melissa had mocked me, all the family gatherings I'd been excluded from. True family doesn't make you beg for basic respect. True family doesn't see you as an embarrassment or an inconvenience. And true family certainly doesn't treat you like a bank account with an expiration date. Tyrese nodded solemnly. "Wise words, Dr. Granger. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for your extraordinary generosity." "Thank you, Tyrese." The red light on the camera went off. Around the studio, the crew began cleaning up equipment and preparing for their midnight coverage. Dr. Halden shook my hand warmly. "Harold, this is truly remarkable. The plaque will be unveiled next month, and we'd love to have you there for the dedication ceremony." "I'd be honored," I replied. Tyrese walked me toward the studio exit. "That was a beautiful tribute to your wife, Dr. Granger." I have to ask, though. Your family must be so proud. Will they be attending the dedication ceremony? I smiled. My family was unavailable for comment tonight. It was 11:58 p.m. when I reached my car. The city was erupting in celebration around me, fireworks, car horns, people cheering in the streets. In 2 minutes, it would be a new year. My phone was already buzzing with notifications, text messages, missed calls, voicemails. I could see Ethan's name appearing over and over on the screen. At exactly midnight, as the city's official New Year's fireworks began exploding overhead, my phone rang. Ethan. I answered on the first ring. What the hell is on the news? His voice was shaking with rage and panic. What did you do? What did you do? I sat in my car, watching the fireworks paint the sky in brilliant colors, listening to my son's voice crack as he realized that his inheritance, his assumed future, had just been donated to charity on live television. Dad, you have to fix this. You have to call them back and explain that it was a mistake, that you weren't thinking clearly. Dad, that was our money. That was my inheritance. Our money. My inheritance. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't understand that it had never been his. Dad, are you listening to me? You just gave away $1 million. $1 million. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to your own family? In the background, I could hear Melissa crying, probably realizing that their expensive lifestyle and big plans had just evaporated. I could hear other voices too, party guests who had undoubtedly watched the broadcast and were now witnessing the meltdown in real time. Dad, please, we can fix this. We can call the hospital, call the lawyers, call the TV station. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't what you really want. But it was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what Janice would have wanted. It was exactly what a man does when he decides to honor the people who truly deserved his love and respect, instead of the ones who had taken both for granted. Dad? Dad? Are you there? Answer me. I listened to my son's panicked voice for another few seconds, thinking about all the times he'd dismissed me, all the ways he'd made me feel like a burden, all the family gatherings where I'd been told I would make everyone uncomfortable. Then I hung up.